So welcome to the second part of the Building a Quiz webpage for FreeCodeCamp. And if you are new to this channel, my name is Rob. I'm with PreCodeCamp, where we try to come at the approach of going through these labs and modules from an instructor point of view. So if you're looking to learn something new or to go over the material that you've already seen but have it explained to you, then this video is going to be for you. And all we ask for in return is if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit the like button. It really helps out that YouTube algorithm and lets other people know that this video is decent enough to be shown to more people. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with our step where we left off. Okay, so we're in step number 11. We just got doing the logo and getting it shrunk all down. And now what it looks like it wants us to do right now with the H1 is use the opposite of the max function. We're going to be utilizing the min function. And you guessed it, it's going to use the smaller value of the 2. And so what we're going to do right here is we're just going to go to an H1. It does say that we want to change the color on this. So we're going to do color, and that's going to change the text color of it, not the background color. And I'm just going to copy this and put it down here. So now we see the HTML CSS quiz. It's big, and that's where we're going to utilize the font size property. And we want to use the min function, and it's going to be 5BW and 1.2 EM. Okay, so there you go. Now you can see that it's going to try to use the minimum there. As we are squeezing its space, you can see it shrinking there, but as we get bigger, it stays that size. So it's going to use the smaller of the 2. All right, let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next part here. All right, so we are on step number 12. It says we want to enable the navigation on the page. Go ahead and add an unordered list with the following items on there. And it says that the list items should also be wrapped in anchor tags. And so this one might be a little bit confusing based upon the word choices that they give you, but we're going to tackle it line by line here. So first, it says it needs an unordered list. So that is where the ULs come into play. And notice that I'm following that pattern that I really want everybody to follow when we're going through this as a brand new student is if you have an opening tag, you want to have a closing tag, because otherwise your code is going to fail the test and you're going to be asking yourself, why isn't this working? You forgot to have a closing tag on there. Next is going to be the list items, and it wants to have info on there. So I'm going to do that all in caps here and close that off. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and do 2 more LI, and then I'll put the text in there. All right. So I have all of the list items there. Now I'm going to put in here the text, and let me go ahead and change this to CSS. Okay. So we can't see it, but it is over here. And I don't know if you got a little frustrated when you were looking at it and stuff, but it's still there. It's all there. It's just being stacked up here in the nav bar, and it's being stacked vertically. Later on, I believe in the CSS, we're going to make it look more natural for a navigational bar. Now, here is the confusing part that it has on here. It says these list items should be wrapped in anchor tags. And when I'm thinking about this from their verbal instructions, I'm saying, okay, I have a list item here. Well, let me wrap it in an anchor tag. And as a student, that's what I would be thinking here. But this is not the proper syntax for the anchor tag. And what it's looking for is for you wrapping the text in the anchor tag. And so that's what this looks like right here. So we're going to come inside of the L, and we're going to do an opening anchor tag, and then we're going to close it off over here as well. Okay. Now, I'm going to get one of these looking proper, and then I'm going to fix the rest. For the H, I'm just going to set that to a hashtag. And now we can see up here, the info is now turned into a hyperlink. I don't know what we're going to be changing this to later on. It doesn't say provide an actual anchor element for it to go down to. I'm pretty sure we're going to be coming back to that part here. So that's what we want to do for each one of these. And maybe I prematurely went ahead and put in these text items a little sooner, but to save time, I'm going to put them all in there like this, and then I'm just going to change them individually here. So now I'm going to do HTML, and then I'll do CSS for this. And I believe that is what it is asking for in this step. Let's go and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step. All right, step number 13 might be a little confusing on here, but we'll try to explain it and break it down here to you. So we want to utilize the child combinator selector, and that is defined by this sign right here, the greater than sign. So it says use this selector to target the unordered list elements. And so what it's having us do, and notice that we're not going to be doing this with any kind of class, and we only want to target the nav section and the UL, unordered list. And so that's what we can do. We're just stepping into the HTML tree here in order to identify what elements do we want to target. And so for this, we're going to do a nav because it's the nav bar, the nav element here. And then we're going to use that combinator that it was talking about. And then we want to do the unordered list. Okay. Now we're going to open up the curly brackets, and this is where we can do our display flex. Don't get thrown off by use flex box. We want to do flex. And then the next thing that we want to do on here says that we want to space them evenly. And so for that to happen, we're going to be doing justify content, and we want this to be space evenly. Okay. And that's what we want to do for it. And notice that we don't see them quite yet. And I don't think it's going to make a difference if I go ahead and just do this with a color here of white, just for you to see that because we made this a flex box, it went from being displayed vertically to being displayed in a nice row. It just collapses. That's what flex does there for us. And then this space evenly. So if I comment that out, you can see how they are just shoved together. And then when we use the space evenly, it's going to space them out in a nice format there for us. So that is going to be one of the tools that you may want to put in your notebook on, hey, how do I make a nav bar? Because that's what we're doing right here. We're making a nav bar, and it's something that's very repeatable that you'll do over and over again. This is something that you might want to take note of. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and check our code here. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next part. So step number 14 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp, it tells us that as this is a quiz, we're going to need a form for the users to submit their answers. You can semantically separate the content within the form utilizing sections. Again, this is for the accessibility, right? And within the main element, go ahead and create 3 nested section elements and make sure that the form has a submission of the following URL. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and create a form. And inside the form, we're going to have 3 sections. So I'm going to go ahead and close off the form, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply those 3 sections that it was talking about. And then I'm going to handle the form action. So let's go ahead and add those sections now. Okay, so now that we have those sections added on here, notice that they do have open and close on there. What we want to do here is we want to add a method. Okay, we want to set that to post. Next is where are they going to submit this to? Well, we're going to have to use an action in order to complete that part. So we're going to do action, and we're going to set that equal to, and make sure we put those quotes on there. Otherwise, this won't work. We're going to highlight this and paste. Okay, I think that this should be good to go. Let's go ahead and check our code. Fingers crossed. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. So step number 15 in building a quiz web page. Now we're diving into a little bit of the accessibility. We're going to be adding the key attribute here of role, and then we're going to assign it a value here, which is called region. And with this combined with the label that I'm thinking that we're probably going to be doing here next, is if we were just to have a screen reader and we were to put the role on here of region, their reading machine will detect it and it will just say region. Okay. Once we add the label, then it can get a little more specific because it could be something like region student information. Okay. That's where I believe that we are gearing towards or driving towards here. So how are we going to complete this step here? All we need to do is type out the keyword of role, and then we're going to set it to region. Okay. That's all it's wanting us to do. It wants us to do this to each one of these sections. And so I'm just going to hit the space bar and paste on each one of these. And I know that the screen real estate is not that great. And maybe we can take off the styles for us to see that a little better on the video. So I believe that's all it's wanting for this. And then maybe in the next step, we're going to add some accessibility labels to this so that way the reader knows what specific region are we talking about. All right, we're moving on to the next section here. So now we're in step number 16 here, and it says every region role requires a label. And that's exactly what I was trying to tell you guys before in the previous step. And so we have this attribute here that we can add to each one of these sections. And that way their screen reader, when it gets to a certain region, it will say region and then student info, region, HTML questions, region, CSS questions. And so that's how it is going to be read when they are mousing through this or mousing over it with their reader. So let's go ahead and add these properties on here, or these attributes. So I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to paste that in there. And then I'm going to, for right now, just do empty quotes and then I'll add the text later because I want to copy this and put it down in each one of the sections. So let me do that. All right, perfect. Next is adding the student info and then the HTML questions and the CSS questions inside these quotes. Let me do that. All right, then it tells us to do inside each one of these sections, let's go ahead and nest an H2 with an ID that matches with the label that we just got done adding. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one here, and then we'll just do a repeat on the others. So now I'm adding the ID, okay, and this is the pattern that we should follow here. And let me go ahead and add that also. So just some things that I'm making sure that I'm doing when I'm doing the quick copy and paste is I'm going in between the section tags and hitting the enter key and putting in the text there. And of course, we need to change each one of these to the corresponding parts, which is this one is going to be HTML questions, and then the other one's going to be CSS questions. Don't forget to tackle the IDs that are on those H2s. All right, so I think that this should satisfy this step here. A lot of things to do on it, a lot of things that could go wrong. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next part here. Step number 17 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp. It tells us that the typeface is very important when it comes to accessibility. Some fonts are easier to read, same thing with colors. And so it wants us to change the font family to this right here. And it only wants us to do that on the H1 and H2. And the way to do that in CSS, to select two things that kind of get the same property and values, we can use a comma separated selector. So we can do H1, H2, and then in here, it wants us to do the font family. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And then it says, use another web safe font in the sans serif family as a fallback. I'm just going to use sans serif and go ahead and close that part off. Next, I'm going to do this part here where it says on the H2 element only, it would like to have a border bottom with the 4 pixels solid and this hex code color. So let me go ahead and copy this so I can just simply paste it. So this is going to be the H2 only, and I'm going to do the border bottom, and then we're going to set that to the underline. You can see that the student info has the underline, the HTML has it, and the CSS also has it. I believe that's all that it needs for this part to be complete. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next part. Step number 18. Man, it removed those hrefs that we did earlier. No worries, but what it wants us to do is with these links that we have here, it wants us to add the hrefs and have it going to the corresponding elements that we have down below. And what do I mean by that? Like, I'm assuming later on this form is going to be growing and getting bigger. And when you click on the info link, then it should go ahead and take you all the way down to that proper section. So how are we going to do that here? We're going to do the href, and we can supply in here a hashtag that goes down to the ID that matches that section. And so if we come down here, we have this section here called student info, it has this ID here. So that's what I'm going to use in that hyperlink. So this is what I'm talking about. We are identifying the element that we would like to navigate down to, and we do that with the hashtag because that is what the HTML browser is going to reference, and it's going to say, hey, where is that ID on the page that goes all the way down for the student info? Next is going to be the HTML, and again, I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste it over here, and I'm going to do the same thing for this. Now, what IDs do I want to go down to? That's the question. It is right here. So we have the HTML questions. That's where we want to go first. So I'm going to copy it, come back up here, and put that in here. And then the last one is the CSS one. So I'm just going to do CSS. And that is how the clicking of these will go. And you're not going to see anything on this page. I don't know if freeCodeCamp blocks URLs. I'm assuming it does. But if you looked at the original one here, and let me go ahead and show you it. When we click on the HTML, for example, notice that it's going to navigate all the way down to the HTML. Let me go ahead and click on it again. There you go. So it navigated the page right down to the HTML. And the same thing if we do the CSS, it's going to go all the way down where it can to the CSS to bring that into view. So that is what we're doing with those links. Now let's go ahead and check our work here. So let's go and check the code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next part. Step number 19 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp, it tells us that let's fill out the content of the quiz. Underneath the student info block, which our cursor is already at, go ahead and add 3 div elements with the class of info. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So what it's asking for is a div with the class of info. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this 2 more times. Perfect. Now, the next thing on here, it says inside of the divs, go ahead and add a label and an input. Now, something that you have to remember is that the label, when we make the label, it does have a closing tag on it. However, the input does not. It is self-closing or a void element. And so we're just going to do something like that. And then this is what we want to put inside each one of these divs, because later on, I'm assuming, again, that it's going to be filled in, because they did not give us any information whatsoever on how would it like us to make this form look other than this input and then the label. Again, we're not going to see anything really visually over on the right-hand side besides the input field. But let's go ahead and check our code here. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step. So step number 20, it says it's important to link the input and the label elements. This provides assistive technology with users with visual references for those input fields. And what we're talking about here is the label. So if we come over here for the label, it would expect us to have the keyword of for, okay? And then it wants the input field to have an ID, okay? So this is how we're going to create the linkage between the two. So let's go ahead and link these here. So this label is going to be for the student name. So we want this to be student name. And then the label here, we can say name. And if we look over here, we now have the name, right? Now, something that I always tell students to check out that you do get for free when we're linking these is right now I'm clicking on this label. I know you can't see it, or maybe you can see that little tiny circle on there, but I'm clicking the name. Notice that my cursor is not going inside there until I actually physically put it in there. Now, once I create the ID here that matches the for, that linkage is now going to be complete. So I'm going to put student name. And now if I click on the name, notice how my cursor automatically goes in there. And so that's a real quick way without doing any kind of screen reading test. You can go ahead and test out the linkage to make sure that your label is linked properly. And this is what we're going to do for the other two that we have down here. This is going to be the email, I believe. So we'll do for and then student email. And then we'll come over here and do email. Next, for the input, we want to make sure that is the ID. And what ID does it need to be? It needs to be the student email. And then the last one here is going to be for the birth date. And then we're going to put in here date, birth. And then as far as the input goes, we want to match the ID with what we put up there for the for, which is birth date. Okay. And again, we can test these out. I click on the email, my cursor goes to the email. I click on the date of birth, it goes over there. Now, we haven't been asked to do anything as far as what type of input fields are these, right? Are they text? Are they date? Are they number? Like, what are they? So that might be something that's coming in the next few steps here. All right. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We are moving on to the next section. So we just did another 10 steps in this process, and we learned a few things about the accessibility. And we are reinforcing those same thoughts and ideas when we are talking about the forms and creating that linkage of the for and the ID. So a lot of neat stuff going on in these 10 steps that we just got done doing. It says we're about 30% complete. Anyways, if you made it to the end of the video, great. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. And please subscribe to the channel. That helps us out. All right, take care.